Prelude to Chapter 3. The night clung to Jericho like a shroud, its streets veiled in shadow. The Israelite spies moved with precision, their eyes scanning every corner, every flicker of torchlight. Sent by Joshua, their mission was simple: assess the enemy, measure the strength of Jericho's defenses, and return with what they learned.
Hebrews!
The cry shattered the silence, followed by the clatter of swords. Torches bobbed in the darkness as guards charged toward the spies. They broke into a sprint, weaving through narrow passages, their breaths quick and shallow. The footsteps behind them grew louder, and the walls of Jericho loomed higher, unyielding. At the edge of the city, they spotted a house built into the wall. Its doorway was draped with a scarlet tapestry, its windows glowing faintly with torchlight. The air was thick with the scent of incense and perfume. There was no doubt this was the home of a prostitute. A woman emerged from the shadows, her gown loose, her movements languid.
Greetings, gentlemen. I am Rahab, your host and servant. How may I please you this evening?
But her eyes widened as she saw their faces, their bearing unmistakable.
You're Israelites, aren't you? Please don't hurt me. My family depends on me.
We mean you no harm. We need shelter, just for the night.
But before another word could be spoken, shouting erupted outside. Rahab darted to the window, her eyes narrowing. The guards were closing in.
The guards are coming. Follow me to the roof, quickly.
The men had no choice but to trust her. She led them to the roof, where bundles of flax lay drying.
Hide here. Don't move.
The guards burst into her home, their swords drawn, their eyes scanning every shadow.
Where are they? We know Israelites were seen entering this area.
Men were here, but they didn't stay. I didn't ask where they were from. They left through the city gates before they closed. If you hurry, you might catch them.
The guards exchanged glances, their suspicion battling with urgency. Finally, they turned and stormed out, their shouts fading into the night. Rahab exhaled, her heart pounding, and returned to the roof. Pulling back the blankets, she found the spies staring at her, their faces a mixture of gratitude and disbelief.
The guards are gone. You're safe for now.
Why have you helped us?
Because I know who your God is. We all do. We've heard of how he parted the sea, of how he destroyed the kings of the Amorites. The hearts of everyone in Jericho have melted in fear. Your God is not like ours. He is the God of heaven and earth.
How can we repay your kindness?
Swear to me, by your Lord, that you will spare my family when you take this city. My father, my mother, my brothers, my sisters. Promise me they will live.
You have our word. This scarlet cord hanging over your wall. Make sure it hangs in your window. It will be a sign to us. Stay inside your house, and no harm will come to you or your family. This I swear.
Rahab nodded, lowering the men over the wall. She did not know what the future held, but in her heart, she felt the weight of something far greater at work. The scarlet cord remained, a thread of hope woven into the tapestry of redemption. Rahab's name would not be forgotten. The woman who hid spies would one day be bound to the lineage of kings. When the Israelites took the city of Jericho and the walls came crumbling down, Rahab married a warrior named Salmon. From the tribe of Judah, their love would bear a son, Boaz.
Welcome back to Pray.com's Heroes in the Bible, Ruth. I'm your host, Savannah Chrisley, and I'm so glad that you're here. Subscribe to this channel and follow the podcast for more amazing stories like these. You can also find a treasure trove of truth to help your walk with God in the Pray.com app. If you've been following along, then you know that Ruth's story has already been a powerful one. In chapter 1, we saw Ruth's radical decision to stay with Naomi when she could have just walked away. In chapter 2, we saw Ruth's faith in action. She showed up, worked hard, and was faithful. And now we've made it to chapter 3, and things are about to get real. Our prelude for today's story featured Rahab, a woman who had to make a bold choice to save her family. This whole chapter of Ruth is about boldness. It's about taking risk. It's about stepping into moments that feel uncomfortable, but yet necessary. And if you've ever had to make a big, scary move, chapter 3 will most certainly speak to you.
The coals of the previous night's fire had faded to gray, cold embers by the time Ruth stirred. She rubbed her calloused hands together, staring into the flames. Her body ached from weeks of labor, but the soreness no longer discouraged her. It was a mark of her growing strength. It brought her joy, but the season was drawing to a close, and a gnawing unease began to settle over her heart. What would happen when the harvest season is over? How would she continue to care for Naomi? By mid-morning, Ruth was immersed in her labor, her hands moving with practiced efficiency. The other women hummed joyfully, excited for the coming harvest festival and the promise of rest. But Ruth's focus was unwavering. Every stalk she gathered was another meal, another day of provision for Naomi. As the sun dipped lower, its once cruel heat softened. Ruth filled her second basket, wiping sweat from her brow with a satisfied smile. She carried them to the silos, where the young reaper she once dreaded now greeted her with respect. Boaz stood by the fire, ladling broth into bowls and tearing pieces of bread. Ruth joined him. She picked up the ladle and began serving alongside him, their movements falling into an easy rhythm. When their eyes met, they exchanged smiles, silent yet full of possibility.
How did you fare today?
2 baskets. I found some roots at the edge of the field, enough to last Naomi and me a few weeks.
As she spoke, Ruth noticed the women hanging garlands of fig leaves and flowers near the barn and silos.
What are they doing?
Oh, they're preparing for the harvest festival. It's a time to celebrate the Lord's generosity.
Ruth listened intently as Boaz quoted the law of Moses, his voice rich with devotion.
The law of Moses says this: celebrate the harvest festival to honor the Lord your God, bringing an offering out of the joy in your heart. Celebrate with your children, servants, and the priests, and do not forget the foreigners, the orphans, and the widows in your midst. Remember that you were once slaves in Egypt and captives, and remember the generosity of your God.
The foreigners and the widows.
My mother was a foreigner, like you. Did you know that?
Really?
Yes. Her name was Rahab. She hailed from Jericho before it came crumbling down. She was a bold woman, brave, much like yourself. Even though she was a foreigner and a harlot, she was grafted into this people. Our God is a God of second chances. He's a God of redemption.
Ruth's admiration for Boaz deepened. She had lived long enough in Israel to see how far many had strayed from their God. But Boaz was different. His devotion to the Lord was evident not just in his words, but in his actions. And Ruth found herself captivated by this man who lived with such integrity. Ruth's gratitude for Boaz grew into something more profound, though she dared not name it yet. What she did know was that she felt a spark of hope. Hope that redemption may not be a distant dream, but a near reality. When Ruth finally stepped inside their home, the warmth of the fire wrapped around her like a long-awaited embrace. The home had changed since their arrival, cozier now, less barren. Yet despite the small comforts, the looming reality of their poverty remained. They had worked tirelessly, but there were limits to what two widows could achieve on their own.
The harvest season is almost over. What are we going to do?
Naomi's eyes glistened as she took Ruth's hands in her own.
Oh, my dear, you've done so much for me. You've labored under the sun, fought through pain, and provided when I had nothing to give. But my child, you deserve more than this. You deserve peace. You deserve rest. And you deserve a life filled with purpose.
Ruth glanced down, unsure how to respond.
I believe it's time for you to ask Boaz to redeem you and to buy the land of my father.
Ruth's head snapped up. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. Naomi chuckled softly, brushing a loose strand of hair from Ruth's face.
Oh, my dear Ruth, you are beautiful, strong, and loyal. I've seen how Boaz looks at you. I've seen the way his eyes soften when you speak, the way he watches your every move. He is a good man, and you must trust both his heart and the law of the Lord to cover you.
Naomi, who once called herself Mara, bitter and broken, now spoke with faith.
How? How do I even ask him for something like this? I'm asking him to change his life for me. And even more horrific, what if he says yes out of compulsion? He's a man of the law, but I don't want him marrying me just because it's his duty. And
Ruth's hands began to shake as she thought of Boaz. She had grown fond of him, yes, perhaps even loved him, but the thought of exposing her heart left her vulnerable. Would he accept her, or would he turn away?
You are no ordinary woman, Ruth. You are a gift. Your strength, your loyalty, your kindness. It's something Boaz sees. This is not just his duty. I believe it would be his joy.
Ruth exhaled, her breath shuddering as she let Naomi's words sink in.
It must be tonight. The magic of the harvest celebration will be the perfect time. Clean yourself up, anoint yourself with fragrant oil, and go to him. But listen carefully. Do not make yourself known until the time is right. Let him eat. Let him drink. Let him celebrate with his workers. Wait until the revelry has faded and he lies down to rest. Then go to him. Uncover his feet and remain there. Let him wake to find you at his feet. Speak your heart. Recite the law of Moses, and let the Lord guide the rest.
Ruth pondered for a long while. She knew this was right, not just because she loved Boaz, but because it's what Naomi needed to survive. This is what they needed to be redeemed, to have some semblance of dignity and legacy restored to them.
I will do everything you've asked, Naomi.
For this task, Ruth would need a courage of a different kind. Not the kind to face toil or hardship, but the bravery to lay her heart bare. Vulnerability was its own battlefield, and tonight she would march into it. What Ruth didn't yet know was that her simple act of faith and devotion would ripple far beyond her imagination. The threshing floor glowed under the soft flicker of dozens of torches, their flames dancing in rhythm with the laughter and music that filled the air. It all wrapped around Ruth like a warm embrace. Flowers adorned the silos and barns. Lanterns laced the edges of the dancing circle. The music swelled, the lilting notes of lyres and tambourines weaving through the claps of hands and stomping feet. Children darted between the adults, their laughter carrying over the melody. A little girl with braided hair tugged at her hand, asking Ruth to dance. Ruth hesitated, but let herself be led into the circle of dancers, her feet moving tentatively at first, then with growing confidence. Laughter bubbled from her lips as the rhythm of the music took hold. Around her, couples swayed together, children twirled in delight. and elders clapped along with the beat. For a moment, Ruth let go of her worries, losing herself in the joy of the evening. A feast had been prepared, and the guests gathered around long tables. At the head, Boaz stood, raising his cup high above the crowd.
Blessed be the Lord, who has brought us through the harvest. He has given us more than we could ever ask, and it is right that we honor him tonight.
The crowd erupted in cheers, raising their cups in unison before settling into the meal. Ruth, sitting at a small table near the edge of the festivities, watched quietly. Her thoughts were interrupted by Boaz. His smile was warm, his presence grounding.
Shalom, Ruth.
Shalom, Boaz. The Lord bless you.
Isn't this something? There's little in this life more satisfying than seeing the people under your care thrive. It's a glimpse of God's goodness. These are my favorite moments.
You've led them well. They're blessed to have you. And so am I.
Boaz's grin widened, and Ruth flushed, suddenly flustered by the weight of her own words.
I mean, Naomi and I are. We're both blessed to have you. Well, not have you. We don't own you or anything. We would have starved without your generosity. The Lord has truly blessed your harvest.
We may plow the fields and sow the seeds, but it is the Lord who brings the harvest. To him be the glory. Enjoy the rest of the celebration, Ruth. Let me know if there's anything you need.
He returned to the celebration, his laughter mingling with the music as he handed out bread and danced with the children. Ruth sunk in her seat and groaned.
What am I doing? Compose yourself, Ruth.
Ruth remained at her table, her eyes following Boaz as he moved among the people. As she watched him, she allowed herself to feel the weight of her desires. She did love him. She knew this now. But the question remained, did he love her? As the night wore on, the festivities began to wane. The torches burned low, and the guests slowly retreated to their beds. Boaz walked among his servants, placing extra blankets over them and tending to the fires. Once everyone was settled, he found a spot near the silo, spread out a blanket, and reclined on a pile of cushions. Within moments, his breathing slowed and he drifted into a peaceful sleep. Ruth watched from a distance. She felt her heart racing. She closed her eyes, summoning her courage.
You can do this.
She approached Boaz, who was fast asleep, face dimly lit by the firelight. She looked at him for a long while, seeing flashes of a possible future with him in her mind. She saw children playing in the amber fields. She saw her standing side by side with Boaz in the fields. She saw Naomi, safe. There was laughter and love. But there was more to it all. In that moment, Ruth felt a stirring, an inkling that her and Boaz were a part of something greater than themselves. Ruth knelt at Boaz's feet. She gently folded the end of his blanket over his ankles, exposing his feet. The cool air brushed against him. He stirred underneath the blanket for a while before waking up. Boaz sat up and looked around.
Who are you?
Ruth sat up and leaned forward.
What are you doing here, Ruth?
You are a kinsman redeemer, Boaz. Your wings are able to uplift and raise up the broken and forgotten. Please, spread your wings over me as a redeemer.
Ruth spoke with faith in her voice and purpose in her heart. She knew that regardless of Boaz's answer, the Lord would take care of her. Boaz remained silent for a long, drawn-out moment. He allowed himself to finally look at Ruth with intention. Her radiant eyes reflected the flickering torches as she gazed up at him. She was a vision of pure beauty. In that one moment, Boaz's breath was completely taken from him. Boaz had come to admire many things about Ruth, her loveliness, her strength, her loyalty, but nothing could come close to that enchanting gaze. He leaned in a little closer and took her hand.
Ruth, you are beautiful and young, yet you did not go after the young men of our village. You didn't seek after the fit or the rich, but remained at my side. You are as faithful as you are beautiful. May the Lord bless you abundantly, regardless of my action or inaction.
Ruth smiled and blushed. Boaz laughed and placed his hand on her cheek.
There is no doubt in my mind that you are a woman of strength, character, and integrity. Since you've arrived in Bethlehem, I've only heard good reports of your worthiness, and I have seen it with my own eyes.
He looked at Ruth with tears welling up in his eyes. Boaz's strong demeanor was cracking, and the vulnerability of a tender heart was showing itself. He held her face with both hands, leaning in closer with an earnest gaze. Then, in a warm whisper only she and the Lord could hear, he answered her heart's question.
I am a redeemer, and I will marry you.
Okay, can we just stop and acknowledge how wild that was? Have you ever gotten secondhand embarrassment? You know, that thing where someone else is doing something embarrassing and you're cringing on their behalf? I was squealing while listening to this episode, imagining myself in Ruth's position. How vulnerable and potentially humiliating this must have been. Ruth Chapter 3 is next level faith in action. So here's the setup. Naomi, Ruth's mother-in-law, comes up with a plan. She's been paying attention and sees how Boaz looks out for Ruth. Naomi's like, girl, it's time to make a move on this man. Okay, maybe she didn't say it exactly like that, but you get the idea. Naomi tells Ruth to wash up, put on some perfume, and head down to the threshing floor where Boaz is working. Ruth's supposed to wait until he's eaten and had something to drink because, y'all know, timing is everything. Then she's supposed to uncover his feet and lie down. This act might sound strange and maybe a bit creepy to us, but back then, it was a way of asking for protection, provision, and marriage. Now, this wasn't a totally crazy idea. Boaz was a kinsman redeemer, a role established in Old Testament law. A kinsman redeemer was responsible for many things. It was his role to buy back property that had been lost by a family member. His role was to defend the family's honor against those who wronged them. A kinsman redeemer's optional responsibility was to marry the widow of a family member and restore their assets so their legacy could continue. And even though Boaz was a kinsman redeemer, it didn't guarantee that he would honor Ruth's proposal. Now, let's pause right here. Imagine the courage it took for Ruth to do this. She's putting herself out there in a big way. There's no guarantee Boaz will react the way she's hoping. He could have rejected her, but Ruth steps out in faith, trusting Naomi's wisdom and God's plan. I've had moments where I've had to do something uncomfortable, unsure of how it would turn out. When my parents' situation changed, everything in my life shifted. Not only did I have custody of my brother and sister, but I also felt a stirring to speak up about criminal justice reform. There was no instruction manual for these shifts, but I had to trust that God had equipped me for everything. And maybe you've been there too, stepping into something new, not knowing if you're ready for it, but trusting that God's already gone before you. Ruth goes to the threshing floor and uncovers Boaz's feet. and lies down. And when Boaz wakes up, he's startled to see a woman lying at his feet. She tells him, "Spread the corner of your garment over me, for you are a kinsman redeemer." Basically, what she's saying is, I'm asking you to be my protector and provider. Will you marry me? And y'all, Boaz's response is so beautiful. He's not angry. He's not offended. He's honored. He calls Ruth a woman of noble character. Boaz says he will do everything he can to make it happen. He's ready to step up for her, but there's one potential snag. Another man who's a closer relative and technically has first rights to redeem Ruth. But Boaz doesn't just shrug his shoulders and give up. He promises Ruth that he'll handle it. He's not afraid of the challenge. He's not running from responsibility. He's stepping up. Boaz points us to the ultimate kinsman redeemer, Jesus, the one who will never leave us or forsake us. This whole chapter makes me think about the power of taking risks with faith. Sometimes God's plan for your life requires you to step out and do something uncomfortable. Ruth's story reminds us that God's favor often waits on the other side of our obedience. She didn't just hope for the best. She listened to wise counsel, acted in faith, and trusted God with the outcome. Bold faith leads to big blessings. There was another woman of faith who had to take a huge risk. We introduced her in the prelude of our story. Her name was Rahab. She had to go against the grain of culture to do what was right. It was risky. There were so many ways it could have gone wrong, but her boldness was rewarded. And as it turns out, Rahab is the mother of a gentleman we know well by now. You guessed it, Boaz. I don't know what bold move God's been asking you to make, but maybe this is your moment. Maybe you're being called to make a phone call, fill out that application, ask for help, or step into a role you may not feel ready for. Let me tell you, you are ready if God's calling you to it. He's already equipped you for it. Your job is to show up like Ruth and trust that God's working behind the scenes. So here's my challenge for you this week. Take the bold step. Make the move. Trust that if you're walking in obedience to God, He's already setting up the next part of your story. Next time, we're diving into Ruth Chapter 4. The grand finale. We're talking redemption, restoration, and blessing so big, you'll need a bigger basket to hold it all. I can't wait for y'all to hear how it all comes together. Thanks for joining me. And if today's message spoke to you, share it with a friend. Sometimes we all need that little reminder just to make that bold move. If you want more stories like this, download the Pray.com app or look up Pray.com wherever you listen to podcasts. Until next time, remember, you're not just walking into the unknown. You're walking into a story that God's already written for you.